The meeting started yet?
Not yet. Going to.
You belong to Baptism?
No, but my wife does.
Oh, nice.
I'm a quick.
What's your wife's name?
Okay.
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 David and Barbara Copy. I think it's joining with expenses.
You're the all Marvel Oz.
Yeah.
I should have sent my money.
As soon as the Wizard of Oz is. Are we okay? Well, let's try it. Hope the sound system works. It's 7 o'clock, so I'll call this meeting of the Ann Arbor Task Force and Community Policing Commission to order. I'm Rich Friedman, co-chair. Let me start by calling the roll. I'm actually first in alphabetical order. I'm here. I hope we can get that fixed, but by the time we finish calling the roll, Anna Gersh,
Here.
Monica Harold,
Here.
Janet Haynes,
Here.
Anna Lemler, not here yet, I expect her. Lori Saginaw, co-chair, is not here tonight. I'll just say she's in California with her 96-year-old mother, making a pilgrimage to the place where her mother was interned. Not here. As I think most people know, we are the task force appointed by the City Council to propose a community policing commission. We've met several times. We've had some discussion of substance. We've had some listening sessions. Last time we voted to adopt as a framework for discussion a template which presented possible language of the ordinance, and we began discussing that. We've received other commentary as well, which we will consider. We were asked last time to prepare a plain language version of the proposed ordinance language in the template, and that work has begun. And let me explain right now the packets that are on that chair. I think there's enough for everybody. It has on the front page the agenda, and then various documents related to Article 3.3 of the template, which concerns incident review, which is the subject we're hoping to discuss tonight. So first is the language from the proposed ordinance language in the template without the commentary, but interspersed in between is the plain language explanations. And then we have some other documents that are explained on the cover, on the front page, all relating to Article 3.3. Let me say also, we are of course very aware of the incident at the Blind Pig the other day, and of other incidents recently. We don't know all the facts, and as the task force, we don't have any role to investigate this. But this is the type of incident for which the commission that we're working on is designed to address. I think, and we hope that it will have a good review process to address incidents like that, to learn all the facts beyond what's available now on social media. The matter is being investigated by the AAPD. We think the incident provides a good illustration of the need for having a commission of this type, and underscores the need to focus on Article 3.3 of the template, which deals with review of incidents, and it will certainly be in our mind as we as we go through that. People who have complaints about the police, we hope we'll be able to bring them to the commission when it's set up. For now, the mayor, city council, or city administrator are appropriate recipients. And again, we have an email address at policetaskforce@a2gov.org. Okay, we're hoping soon to get to discussion of Article 3.3 because I was the drafter of the template. I think that for this meeting I'm going to sit to the side. At one point I thought I'd sit off the desk, but I was prevailed on to sit with the committee. But I will sit over there, and Janet Haynes has graciously agreed to take over the chair of the meeting. So I will pass it on to her. Move to the side.
Thank you, Rich. So the first thing is to approve the agenda. Can I have a motion? Approved. Second?
Second.
Thank you. So the agenda is approved as it is written. And again, everyone should have a copy of the packet, and on the very first page is the agenda so you can follow with us. Feedback discussion? Anna?
Yes, I have a motion from the task force I'd like to read. The task force thanks Transforming Justice Washtenaw and the Coalition Against White Supremacy for their submissions, each of which represented a great deal of hard work. The task force members commit to reviewing the content of each. As the task force works its way through the template that it adopted by unanimous vote of those members present, as a framework for discussion, any member may present for consideration any other possible provisions or language that the member believes merits discussion and is pertinent to the subject that the task force is discussing.
Thank you. You've heard the reading of that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, the task force members?
Aye.
Thank you. At this point, we would like to open up our floor for community comment related to the feedback, and we are opening it up for 5 minutes. So if you would like to speak to this issue, would you please come forward?
Just on the mic? Yeah, so I got interrupted by the start of the meeting. I was telling some people I was trying to FOIA police records regarding myself in the city of Ann Arbor. My name's Sam Copy. Yeah, not only did they make me come back twice, go through like the sheriff's security each time to pay the FOIA, which I don't have any problem with, but they should learn how to add so I don't have to come and then come again. It seems like I'm not actually shocked that the police don't value my time, but I just want to put it on the record. And I don't know if it's standard practice when people are at the records window at the police department, perhaps, well, if the police officers who were here hadn't left, maybe they could answer it. Is it standard practice to have a sergeant at the records window when someone's there that's already been through security? I'd love to know that, and I know, and it's odd that it's odd that the police were called on me when I was at the city clerk's office. This is all quite odd. There's a couple people who vote at the UM Coliseum here. One of them is one of my city council people, Crapel, and he hasn't addressed the issue of voting at the UM Coliseum whatsoever, especially for this August election where I am standing and running for precinct delegate in Ward 4, Precinct 3 as a Democrat.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll make it brief since we're on time. Okay. I was at the Blind Pig. Live on Washington. I was coming around the corner. Let's see. How should I break this down? All right. I want to humanize everyone because I'm not going to have a story where I keep saying the black guy, the white guy. We got Brian, Jim, and Jerry. Brian and Jim were in a fight. Brian and Jim were around the Blind Pig tussling. Nothing real serious. I don't even think anyone had a bruise. Brian was with some friends. Some people in the alleyway said they were going to call the police. Brian and his friends decided to leave. Jim decided to follow Brian out into the street and re-engage him again. As the police came up, the police see Jim with Brian on all fours for, I guess by the counts of the video, at least 2.5 minutes. When the police break up Jim and Brian, only Jim gets a knee to the back. Only Jim gets the handcuffs on. Only Jim and his friends get handcuffed while Brian and his girlfriend stand there calmly as Hindu cows. So what we're saying is that when Jerry shows up, Jerry needs to treat Jim and Brian the same. One, because it's morally right. Two, because it's practically right. If you leave another person who's involved in a fight completely unattended, he can pull a gun, assault someone else. Then we have an even worse problem. Now we're in a physical confrontation. There's many practical reasons why police need oversight. I think that this board hopefully will do a good job of representing the community in that effort, and I hope that the rest of the community takes note and steps forward and pull out your camera. It's leverage.
Thank you. For the record, could you please say your name?
My name is David Bigham.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just for everyone else, make sure you leave the mic on stand or keep it up to your face because
Okay.
it kept going
Yeah,
down
sorry.
and you lost a half what we said.
Any other comments concerning the feedback? Concerning the feedback.
So hi, my name is Marin Spolum, and I'm a member of Transforming Justice Washtenaw. So I just wanted to say that TJW is committed to the creation of a police commission that is independent, transparent, representative, and adequately funded. We've reviewed your template. Do you want to take over?
Sure.
I have it right here.
Hi, everybody. We reviewed your template. While there are many points in the template with which we agree, fundamental differences remain. First and foremost, TJW is troubled by what seems to be the underlying premise of the task force template. As written, the template implies that the core problem to be addressed by the police commission is community misunderstanding and mistrust of police. Community members are not confused. We understand that if policing exists, then there must be oversight to protect people from well-documented harm to our bodies, harm to our communities through surveillance, criminalization, and mass incarceration, and harm to our country that is becoming more policed and authoritarian every day. To point to a nearby analogy, Michigan State had a responsibility to maintain structures and policies to protect its students whether or not a single incident was ever reported, because unchecked institutional power will always lead to abuse. Moreover, mistrust of the police is based on experience, such as the stories that I and others have presented to this task force, and includes the 2014 police killing of Ora Rosser and this past week's incident at the Blind Pig, in which Ann Arbor police responded by handcuffing only black people, even though black and white people were engaged in the conflict. We need a police commission because Ann Arbor is failing to ensure that all people who live and come to Ann Arbor will have their rights, dignity, and safety protected when interacting with police. Ann Arbor is also failing to ensure that incidents of police abuse of people's rights, dignity, and safety will be tracked and addressed, and that the lessons regarding police behavior will be translated into better policies, programs, and protocols. Let me repeat the first point. Ann Arbor is failing to ensure that all people who live and come to Ann Arbor have their rights, dignity, and safety protected when interacting with police. Translated into policy, this means some very specific things, such as an independent commission that is appointed by the Human Rights Commission that does not include current or former AAPD officers. A transparent commission committed to educating the community about the complaint process through community meetings and informational materials so that everyone knows that their humanity is more important than the power of the police. An adequately funded commission that not only reviews past incidents, but can also conduct investigations using subpoena power when needed. Right now, you, the members of the police task force, have a tremendous responsibility and opportunity to put in place a structure and policies that protect people's rights, dignity, and freedom from harm. TJW stands ready to support that goal. Thank you.
Thank
Sorry
you.
I was late.
That's okay. Thank you.
My name is Sergeant Donovan Smith. I'm here representing CAUSE. we'd just like to reiterate that we're submitting a substantive proposal and a distinct proposal. It is not feedback to Rich's document, it's its own document. We'd like to show our support for TJW's extensive work, many members of the HRC for years, and for community members like David that came to speak tonight. And we'd like you to consider these proposals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing? If this is going to be real, if we're going to make real change, the crowd can't look like this. It can't. It can't. The people most affected by this need to be represented. They need to be reached out to in a real way that's not superficial. We've heard things before. It can't look like this. I love y'all, I do, but this cannot look like this if we're gonna make real change. This can't be the demographic of the only people that come here. Or else what are we doing? We all know what's going on. We can afford lawyers. We can afford protection. The ones that can't need to be here. The ones that can't need to feel empowered. If not, we're spinning our wheels.
Thank you.
Agreed.
At this time, we're going to begin discussion on Article 3.3, which is the incident review. And I would like to say just a couple of words about how this process is going to happen. So we're going to review 4 sections of this, 4 points of this particular section, after which we will open it up for comments from the community, and it will be comments on what we have already discussed. After that, we will go to the next 4 points, and we will again open it up to the community after those have been discussed for the community to make comments. So I'm hoping that everybody is on the same page on this. We do not want to cut off any comments, but we are very conscious of the amount of time that we have and the amount of work that this task force has in getting to the finish line. So with that, I will start the discussion with this first question.
Janet, sorry, can I just make a comment before we dive into that?
Certainly.
I just wanted to bring up a point, and in your packet is comments and feedback from the city administrator. And so if you haven't had a chance to review that, it's in here. And for this section, as well as for the entire proposal that Rich drafted up, there's basically the suggestion over and over again that the powers that we would like as a task force to have be made possible, both in the sense of giving it some teeth that we've all wanted, and in the sense of making it proactive as opposed to just retroactive or reactive. So I actually am curious because to me, based on the feedback by Mr. Lazarus, I'm concerned that something that is meaningful may not be passable. And I'm kind of curious, I don't know if Sumi or Graydon might be able to respond to us about a question about what impact Mr. Lazarus's feedback will have on the city council as far as passing something. And you know, if the feedback he's giving is going to be taken by the city council and adopted, then we really have to question as a task force basically what we're doing and why we're doing it. Yeah.
Graydon, can I go first?
Yeah.
How I see politics. So ultimately, whatever you recommend comes to city council. And that is weighed against community input we get, legal attorneys' opinions, and city administrator staff. I mean, there's multiple and competing interests, and each of us weighs these. We don't all give it the same weight. I mean, some of us give more weight to what community is letting us know. And so I don't believe that Mr. Lazarus's review of what we have done is the final word on this, because I think City Council has trusted you and nominated all of you to do this work and bring us suggestions. So ultimately, I don't feel that we should be limited by what Mr. Lazarus or other staff members are letting us know. I think we have to do a deep dive and come out with an honest answer. and then we can see whether city council has the will to implement that or not. But I think it is our duty to represent our residents and the reality of Ann Arbor, to come up with the honest report out of this. That's how I see it. I don't think we should be worried too much about whether it's going to be accepted or not. I think honesty and putting it out is the ultimate goal. And then we can see if there is a political will in this city, after all these words, whether we are going to implement this or not, right?
Thank you, Sumi.
Thank you.
I can't speak for the other council members how they're going to read or interpret. I think what you'll see is everybody will take all the information provided and try to weigh it against all the different risks, the fiduciary responsibilities we have against legal responsibilities, and then try to make sure that we create a commission that, I think the most important thing is get a commission up and running and get it going, understanding that there's going to be change over time as commission takes place. I would agree with Sumi in that I think Mr. Lazarus is providing information from his perspective. I think as a gauge, and you're getting information also from the city attorney as you go forward of what are limits or what are constraints right now within the system, legally, contractually, and other things that, quite frankly, aren't going to change in the next 6 weeks. It's not going to happen. But it doesn't mean they can't change over time. But I think council members will weigh all the information. I think they'll talk to constituents. I think they'll all be open to listening, and then each person will have to make their decision based on what they feel is the best way to go forward at that point in time. But I would agree. I think there's a lot of discussion. There's going to be a lot of compromise coming out of this group in terms of what's finally in, and I think that's what you'll see come out of council. Okay. There'll be compromise that'll happen between all the different documents, and that'll be the way you're going to be able to get forward.
Okay, and I think to just respond to that one of the fears that I have, and that I think is mirrored by others as well, is if what is passed is basically an advisory board with very little power, it gives the presentation that something has been addressed without actually addressing anything. And that is perhaps worse than having nothing at all. To be able to point to something and say that, this exists, look, we fixed this problem, that actually cannot fix anything is worse, in my mind, for this task force to do than to have nothing at all. So when it comes to trusting that the city council is gonna, be able to pass something through that, we can stand by, that's my concern.
Can I add a comment and thought? This is a formality process point that I did not realize that our discussion agenda item meant that we were just making a motion. So I'm grateful to be having some conversation about this. I want to really thank folks for all of the work that you did and all of the documents that you've provided us. On the note of limitations and what is in the city charter and also what is in other policies, I'm wondering if when we are creating the content that we are looking at, obviously we will incorporate the other documents, so we will be reviewing all of the various feedback and documents. But my question is, because we've already been facing various limitations and barriers that are written in policy and in law, how do we create something with the vision of being able to transform it, even if that means in the next 6 weeks we won't be able to do that? So how do we write in it, maybe for now, this is all we can do, but this is actually the ultimate outcome?
I think you can write things as there can be aspirational of what you want to strive, because I think you hit it 2 meetings ago that it's going to take a while, even once the commission's formed, to kind of, what are we going to do first? Who are we going to be? What are we going to go after? And it's going to take time, because there's going to have to be education on the commission no matter what, to be able, so they can adequately, because no matter what, I think you want a body that can advocate, but it can also be in some ways a disinterested third party, a neutral party, to try and help interpret and resolve issues that take place. And I think from what I've read, from what I've reviewed from other commissions that have stood up, you know, once they start up, it's 6, 8, 9 months that they finally really are in a position to get up and going and to conduct the business of what they need, what they decided, or what are the most urgent issues they need to address at that time.
So they can change, they can propose charter changes, policy changes.
I think you can.
throughout?
Charter changes are hard. Charter changes have to go to the vote of all the residents of the city. And if you're looking at elections, if you wanted a charter change now, you're 18
Or
months out
ordinance or
before that's
whatever.
going to happen.
Right.
And there's other ways. You know, it's rather to do an ordinance or a resolution.
Right.
In some ways, it could be better to do an ordinance or a resolution coming out, written in the resolution that the intent of the commission is to write an ordinance and have it ready within 6 months or whatever. That could allow some more time to work through some of the issues or the restrictions that are there, to be able to actually sit down and work through those or figure out a compromise or a resolution, you know, some type of resolution to it. So I think there can be aspirations that we want to, if we can't, recognizing there are limits, some limits right now, or some boundaries that we have to work in, but there's nothing that says we can't push them to try and, you know, to get at least initially where we have a commission that can take a deeper dive look and spend time to try and figure out how can we best serve everyone that we need to. So.
And Robin Stevens, I was under the impression from Mr. Lazarus that the document that we create will be presented to City Council in its entirety.
Yes.
So we should create what we think is appropriate and right, regardless of the limitations and what have you, and we'll leave it up to City Council to then say, if Mr. Lazarus gives them something else, then it's on them, it's not on us. We've done what we thought was best, and then the city took it from there. So at this point, I just say, let's go for what we think is right, what's best for the community and the police, and go from there with no limitations, none. Except the law. As Rich has explained, there are certain ways that it has to be written. Yeah.
If I can interject, my commitment from the start has been to take the recommendations that the task force submits, and the resolution that council passed was that those recommendations would come through the city administrator, and I would pass those to the city council. There will be some aspects, as Mr. Crapel said, that run counter to the city charter, and those will take a period of time if council chooses to adopt them to be enacted, because as Mr. Crapel said, charter changes require a vote of the citizenry in the city of Ann Arbor. And well, because you have to have the language posted by August beyond the November election, and the commission or the task force won't be finished with its work until after that deadline passes. There are also things that the task force may recommend that require adjustment to collective bargaining agreements, which, as a good faith partner in those agreements, the city is bound to comply with. But there are opportunities when those contracts come up for renewal to make changes, unless we do it by mutual agreement with the police union. So early on, when I mentioned that there could be a range of recommendations, that's what I was referring to. There may also be some things that the task force may not feel that it can adequately address right now, and may want to leave those up to the police commission once formed to address. So my commitment from the start has been all of those will be passed through to council. There are some that I will explain are not possible right now and give the reason for it. There will be some that I may not agree with, and I would give the reason for that as well. But ultimately, it's up to the city council to adopt the basis of what the commission's charter will be, and I will not alter, censor, or otherwise modify the recommendations from the task force, but there may be some items that I would recommend that the council not adopt, and they will be given good, solid reasons that are based in the charter, in the contracts or in practice. And then council will be able to decide what direction they want to go.
So, Mr. Lazarus, would you, just for my clarification, so those things that we got for you, that you said we need to rewrite, those things can't be done, these are things from your perspective. These aren't things that bind us as a task force to say, well, let's not even do that, because it's not going to happen. Because I think some of us are feeling that way. Why go through this to then only be told, well, it's got to go through the city administrator, and that's where the final word was. So for clarification, the final word on this does not rest with you. It rests with city council, and again, the only restriction we have are those things that we're restricted by law.
Correct.
And as I hear you saying, Grayton, we can be aspirational.
Absolutely.
And we can create the kind of thing, we can create what we want in the commission, what we're hearing from the community, and what we in our collective experiences bring to the table to say, this is what is necessary in order for there to be effective oversight of the police in the city of Ann Arbor for its citizens and those that participate within the city. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
I think that's fine. I think, as Mr. Lazarus said, all information will be presented to council, and I think at some point there's going to be things you can and can't do. There'll be some compromise, but as I see this is, once the commission gets up and running, it's a continuous working process.
Yep.
That, I think whether it's, we have bylaws or whatever it is for the commission, I think we get the initial set so you can get up and you can run, so you can function, and then it'll be an evolving process as we go. Hopefully, we would, for me, the commission would get to the point where we're not addressing behavioral issues or things like that, but we're looking at better ways to education both ways, whether it's for the police, for the community, how to share information, that we move beyond the problems of anyone feeling that they're not treated the same or equal as anyone else.
I think we'll move beyond that when it's not happening.
Well,
But
and
one of
I
the
agree,
things I just
but
want to say is, and when past transgressions are addressed. So I just want to say, yes, it's important that we put something on the table. What we're just agreeing to now is we're going to put something transformative on the table. And we're going to do that despite the feedback that we've gotten from Howard, knowing that city council will be the last word. So in my mind, we can complete that conversation if everyone's comfortable. I appreciate addressing it, and I know we have an agenda to attend to. So unless anybody else has something to add, I feel complete in my questions.
I just want to say very briefly, as far as I'm concerned, the template that we are using as a framework, which I drafted, I don't think it requires, if that were adopted, I don't think it requires any charter changes. The city administrator might disagree, city attorney might disagree. I don't think it does. Obviously, there are other things that we might consider that would require charter changes, whether we'd adopt them or not. But I don't want the conversation to go on the basis that the template that's been presented requires charter changes. I don't think it does.
Thank you. With that, can we move?
I think if Mr. Rogers could talk about it. But if you want me to wait on
I would appreciate it. I would appreciate it. I would like to start the interview review of discussion 3.3, and then we will open it up after we have talked about 3 of these points, and then we will open it up. And yes, at that point, I would like for you to entertain.
You said you can only speak on what you're talking about in these points. And I just have something to say about what Mr. Lazarus said. But if I can say it when you get to these points, I'll wait.
All right, you can be, thank you. So, discussion of 3.3. And I would like to open it up with this question: should the commission, in addition to being able to review the internal investigation to ensure that it was full and proper, and to make recommendations, have the power to make its own inquiry into an incident and draw its own factual conclusions? Any discussions on that point?
If
it can't, why would we have it?
Right.
So it's like,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Thank you, Dwight. That was easy.
I think one of the things we want to be careful of, and it seems that it having been implied in some of the feedback that we've gotten, is that the commission is simply there for review of what's already been done. And so if you say, should they have the power to do their own investigation, some level of investigation, then to the degree that that's what's going to be, as Dwight said, if they can't do that, then why review? Yeah, and I think that's the concern, that it's not just a body that reviews what's already been done.
But has the ability to actually do their own inquiry.
Yes.
Can I just say, I mean, this ties into the last conversation because that question was basically posed in Mr. Lazarus's comments. I mean, I think he, as I read the comments, he took the view that there are some bodies that are limited in that way, that the body only has the power to review what the internal investigation did. And so I think it's a question for us is do we want to go beyond? And I've thought from the beginning that the sense of the task force was yes. So this is the first instance, an instance in which he's given us his feedback, and I think the sense of the task force is, well, we disagree with that, so we're going to go beyond.
I was going to ask the same thing. Are we voting? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I hear the question again? I'm sorry.
The question,
That we're voting on.
the question is, should the commission, in addition to being able to review the internal investigation to ensure that it was full and proper and to make recommendations, have the power to make its own inquiry into an incident and draw its own factual conclusions?
Okay, so for me, the question still sounds like what Monica was saying, that it would be after the fact. So it's because you said something about the internal investigation.
Yes.
Okay, and then what I heard Rich saying was that they should be able to go beyond that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
In
Okay.
addition to, it's saying in addition to being
that.
able to review the internal investigation,
Okay.
should be able to make its own inquiry and draw its own factual conclusions.
Right, and like, you know, I've discussed with some of you very informally, for me as a criminal defense attorney, even when I looked at the video, I'm thinking, okay, if the task force was up and running, at what point, commission, I'm sorry, was up and running, at what point would it be fair to all parties for the commission to do their investigation? Because people could have, and I'm just using the video as a reference point because I think it does support the fact that yes, an oversight board is necessary. But from what I saw, I don't know the background, we don't know what the investigation is going to pull out, people could potentially be charged criminally. And we want to make sure that people have fair criminal process. And if there's a police investigation and then a commission investigation that could potentially develop different information, additional information, then you start to get into all of these kind of criminal rules about what can be used and what can't because of the way that it's collected. And then it could create unfairness to not only, or to the person who could potentially be charged, but it could also create unfairness to the police. And we want to make sure that this is fair all the way around. So I guess for me the question is, at what point the commission would do their investigation and be able to go outside of what the police or whoever, and usually when it involves an Ann Arbor police, another jurisdiction does the investigation, like Michigan State Police or, you know, Washtenaw County Sheriff, but not the internal, the agency that the officer works for. So that would be my question, and is that what we're voting on? At what point? I think that they should absolutely be able to do an independent investigation. I think that there should be no restrictions on that. But my concern is at what point? To make sure that the process is fair.
Yeah, I think it's an important issue. I suggest we discuss it in conjunction with 3.3.7, which talks about timing.
Okay,
So,
so I'm getting ahead, okay.
yeah, that's
Okay,
all. I
that's
mean,
fine.
the
That's
question
fine.
now is, should the commission be able to do it?
Yes,
Period.
okay, well,
And
that I
then
can do,
timing
that's
is a
fine.
detail.
Yeah.
Anna?
Oh, sorry, I just have a quick question. I'm just wondering about the meaning or definition of factual conclusions. I'm wondering if that is a legal term and what that means, because I think that people can disagree on facts or what a fact is, and so I'm just curious about what that means, and if and also considering what our supplemental document may be, which we talked about at our last meeting, which is to provide more context potentially to language that we are using that we all may have different definitions for. So what's our definition of that? So either it could be in here or it might be part of the supplemental piece.
Want me to address it?
It's a twofold.
You happen to have raised it's a very deep issue. What's a fact and all that, which philosophers talk about for years. But so we can't really resolve it. But the basic idea is, should the commission be able to say, this is what we think happened, and characterize it? We think it's good or bad. The officer acted properly. The officer acted improperly, and go beyond. Simply the department conducted a proper inquiry. That's the basic idea.
Could we just say, and draw its own conclusions?
You can, but I think if you want to say conclusions as to facts and in other words, I mean, this isn't language in the ordinance, so we don't have to worry about it too much. This is just a basic idea. Do we want the commission to do its own inquiry and yes, draw its own conclusions as to the facts, as to propriety, everything, but it includes the factual inquiry, which is the hardest part, actually, making the investigation. I think that's why when I drafted that, I emphasized the fact.
Yeah, so yes,
So
we agree,
are we
right?
in accordance with this?
Yeah.
This is an easy yes.
All right.
Moving on.
3.3.2. Questions? We're allowed to have questions.
No, I mean, I agree,
Absolutely.
I agree, but this one is,
All right. 3.3.2, initiation of review. Any person may file a complaint and may do so in any manner, orally or in writing. The commission shall facilitate initiation of review by providing an email address, a website, a telephone number, and a mailing address for initiation of review. It shall post on an easily accessible website a single complaint form, and the AAPD shall also keep copies of the form and provide them on request. The commission shall also seek to make copies available at each branch of the Ann Arbor District Library. The form shall be offered only for convenience and shall not be required to file a complaint. The commission itself may also initiate review of this incident. So we have discussion on this particular. Task force members, are we in a?
Go ahead, Rich.
Rich, go ahead.
You look like you had something.
Yeah, obviously the intent here is to make it as easy as possible to add to begin a complaint. The TJW statement, and also I believe Helen Fox's, which we didn't include in the packet because it only addressed this one point with respect to 3.3, but both of them suggest other places where it could be where the form should be available, and I think that's fine. I think I'd be willing to accept something. I'd be happy to accept something like that as a friendly amendment, and we can work on the language later. I think the TJW, if I understood the statement correctly, they're suggesting that the police officers should be informed about the complaint process and give good information about it to anybody who asks. So if there's, in other words, somebody's, I guess, speaking to an officer and has a complaint, and the person says, "I want to file a complaint," the officer should be able to do something about that. And I think that's fine too. And I'd be happy to work on language incorporating those in.
So, task force members, are we in accordance with this? And also recognizing that there were suggestions from TJ R and others, and should we look at incorporating some of those suggestions?
I had a question and a concern about one thing that was suggested, and that is that at the Ann Arbor Public Library locations and community centers, that people should be trained to take these complaints and then forward them. I think they should be available to make them convenient for people throughout the city to get it. I think it's a great idea to have them at places where you can pick it up, like the Ann Arbor Public Library, perhaps even the post office, just to throw something out there. But to have people in those locations actually do intake of the complaints and forward them on, if I'm understanding what the suggestion was, is a little concerning for me.
And I agree with that, Monica, because if you're taking a complaint from someone, you need to take it in a specific way where you're not leading and asking questions, and so that would take some training. And I don't feel like, the library is going to have someone there that's trained to do that. So if the complaint is there, I wouldn't want to prohibit anyone from being able to file it, but maybe there's a way. And the other question I had about this was, who is accepting the complaint? Is the complaint going directly to the police, or is it coming to the commission directly, get a case number, and then, and copied and logged, and then passed on to the police for their investigation? So that's my question.
My understanding from what we've talked about and what was written was that because there are these different sort of complicated confidentiality categories, that any complaint that was accepted would be immediately turned over to task force commission members, and so that they could completely explain as soon as possible to whoever makes the complaint exactly what these confidentiality categories mean to them. My understanding is that all the places that it could be available is great, but it needs to get explained by somebody on the commission ideally. That's sort of my understanding of it.
So given that, should we incorporate, how do I want to say this? Should we look at incorporating the suggestions, but with our own responses to those suggestions into this particular section? Am I making that clear?
It's a sticking point.
I would really like to incorporate it as one of those aspirational aspects, because what it says here is that people at these different community locations would be instructed on proper procedure and proper training and how to file and not discourage people from filing. And so aspirationally, there might be a way that the commission could prepare certain people in these community spaces to properly take the complaints. So I think as giving it as a potential power is both aspirational and possible and would be beneficial to the community.
So where are we with this?
I can see how written complaints can be given at various places, but I have a hard time imagining that we could do an adequate job of training people to take an oral. I can't even imagine. And that we would need to refer them to another site.
And that maybe that's a confidentiality issue too.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Because does that mean that we have to have people in the public libraries or community centers sign confidentiality statements?
It can be, it might be one of those things that it's an issue that's needs to be addressed, and it's for the whole commission, because I think it's going to take, we're not going to be able to figure it out, but it'll take a little time to properly figure it out to ensure that it's done correctly, and then that people's privacy is maintained throughout the process. But I can, it can be one of those things in the parking that commission, you know, imagine coming out, there's going to be several items. Commission's going to need to address, you know, we recognize this is an issue and this is an issue, and we need to, you know, it's going to need to be addressed down the line. So.
Let me say more. It's clear to me that people need to be able to go to more places than simply the police office and wherever we have an office. Not we, because I'm not going to be on it.
That's what you said last time.
I've said that umpteen times.
So perhaps
but
that's
there need to be a multiplicity of places where people can file complaints.
Okay.
Right, that there are many places, and then also, there's still
ways in which we can do this and accept it. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. 3.3.3. Procedural choices in filing a complaint.
I'm sorry if I'm taking this back.
No.
But did we decide, or are we not deciding who receives the complaint? Right now, they're received by the police department. Will that continue?
I'm sorry. The intention was that, and maybe that has to be clarified, that it goes to the commission.
To the commission.
To the
Okay.
commission, and then it
I
would.
think that has to be
yeah,
clarified
yeah,
because I wasn't clear on
yeah,
that.
okay.
So all complaints will be accepted by the commission
Yeah.
and then passed on to the police.
That's right.
Okay.
But just for clarification, we are talking about there being multiple places where people can
Multiple-
get,
Yes. That they can get
the
it.
complaint, because
Correct.
that's important, that
Yes.
people not have to go to the police department to get the
Oh,
complaint.
absolutely,
No.
absolutely. And they can
So-
do it online too, or by telephone, or,
Okay.
yeah, all sorts of
Various
ways.
ways.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Okay.
right.
3.3.3.
Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Yeah.
I got lost.
3.3.4.
Point
I
three.
thought we were
Point three?
3.3. Yeah.
Point three.
Oh, all right, I'm sorry. Okay. Procedural choices in filing of complaint. When review, would it be better for me to read it from the document that everybody has rather than our document, because it is different?
Well, if you're looking at the agenda packet,
Yeah, all right.
it's the same, yeah.
Okay. Procedural choices in filing of complaint. When review of an incident is initiated by the filing of a complaint, the complainant shall have the following procedural choices. A, the complainant may choose to file the complaint anonymously or not. If the complainant files the complaint anonymously, the commission shall proceed to act on the complaint without attempting to determine the identity of or to make further contact with the complainant. If the complainant is made without revealing the identity of the complainant, the commission shall presume that it is made anonymously. B, the complainant should, we discuss that, or should I just continue on?
I just have a question on that one.
Sure.
You talked about what would happen if they are filed. It says initially the complainant may choose to file the complaint anonymously or not.
Yes.
It addresses what happens if they are filed anonymously. It doesn't address what happens if not.
I think that's under C.
Yes, that's under C.
Okay.
Okay. B, the complainant may choose to file the complaint under seal or not. If the complaint is filed under seal, then neither the commission nor the city nor any agent of either shall disclose publicly that the complaint has been made or the substance of it, except that it's in annual report of the commission shall state the number of complaints so filed in the past year. The commission shall treat a complaint as having been filed under seal only if the complainant explicitly makes that choice. Questions, discussion? C, if the complaint is not filed anonymously or under seal, the complainant may choose to file the complaint openly or confidentially. If the complaint is filed openly, the complainant will have the option of appearing before the commission or the members or commission designated to act on the complaint at a public session, and the commission shall make no attempt to conceal the identity of the complainant. If the complaint is filed confidentially, The complainant will have the option of appearing before the commission or the members of the committee designated to act on the complaint at a closed session, and the commission and the city and the agents of both shall take care not to disclose publicly the identity of the complainant or to disclose information that would facilitate discovery of the identity of the complainant until such time as the complainant clearly indicates intention to file the complaint openly. The commission shall presume that a complaint is filed confidentially. Any discussion? That was a lot to take in.
There's one more paragraph.
The complaint forms made available pursuant to 3.3.2 shall state these choices clearly and give the complainant a chance to choose. In addition, if the complaint is not filed anonymously, a member or representative of the commission shall attempt promptly to communicate with the complainant and explain the complainant's options. Any questions, any thoughts, any discussion?
There was a recommendation by one of the documents that we received that a plaintiff should be notified that their complaint was received, and I think that's something we should consider. Because it just lets them know that they've got it. It just says in a timely manner that the complainant should be notified that the complaint has been received. And I thought that was a good and fair suggestion.
Yes.
Yes. Say, yeah, it's easy enough because the last sentence says a member or representative shall attempt promptly to communicate with the complainant and explain the complainant's options. It's easy enough to add to acknowledge receipt, to notify the person of receipt and explain options. Okay.
I believe this is also a difference in the one of the templates we received, that there's a section that the commission can request the following information regarding an incident from the police chief. Am I right that that's not in your version? And then it lists.
It wouldn't be here because this isn't requesting
Oh, I'm
any
sorry.
information
I'm
from the
sorry.
police chief yet. This is
The
just-
table isn't matching up here. I
This
apologize.
is just dealing with the
Thank
complaint.
you. So then there were 3 separate additions.
Yes.
To 3.3. Oh, no, 1. Sorry. Thank you. Ignore my comment there.
Okay. Are we okay with this one, with the addition of acknowledging receipt of the complaint?
Yes.
All right. Show of thumb. All right. 3.3.4, time for initiation of review. There is no time limit for filing a complaint or for initiation of review of an incident. The commission will exercise appropriate caution in trying to determine the facts of an incident that is no longer recent, but it shall act on the recognition that no matter how old an incident is, it may hold lessons for the future. Comment? No time limit whatsoever. Okay.
Is there no statute of limitation on this, or because it doesn't have a legal ramification? So, got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Did you want to say something?
No, I'll just say, no time limit means
No time
no time limit. You can always learn from the past.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it is at this point, according to our agenda, that we will open it up for public comment on, pardon? And Shirley, yes, Ms. Beckley will go first, and then the comments are pertaining to this section, with the exception of Ms. Beckley.
Thank you. I made a notation on your 3.3.2. Now, first of all of this is very confusing, but I'm trying to follow. And I do know that we have another document that I've looked at. But I'm wondering, when someone has a complaint, rather than you all, not you all, but the commission that you're going to set up might not consider having, rather than have places for the community to go to get a complaint, why not ask, or when you put this in the ordinance, that we have either a kiosk in the city somewhere, so they don't have to go to the police, but there's a kiosk or some small office within City Hall, such as when we had a Human Rights Commission. Since we don't have one and the Human Rights Commission doesn't have an office, maybe they could have a kiosk where people that don't have computers, access to computers, or don't have a way to get this complaint could just walk into City Hall, because most people in the community know where that is. So I would like to suggest that maybe that could be an option rather than having complaints around the city, because that could be dangerous too, I think, and confusing if you have them like in the library, or like you say, you need somebody to train to do this. If you have it in one spot, then you don't have to worry about all that. You know, I don't think it has to be that complicated. I'm just throwing that out from someone in the community. And when we did have a human rights office, it was a place that everybody could come to make a complaint. So since we're limited in money, I don't even know if we're going to have, if the commission is going to have money, but maybe a kiosk doesn't cost as much to put complaints in, and people could come in and pick it up and have somewhere to deposit. That way that keeps them, those of us that don't want to go to the police or haven't built up that trust yet. So I'd like to offer that as a suggestion.
You're talking about a kiosk like with the forms available and a sealed box that they could deposit it in?
Yes.
In the city building?
And yes. And then that could be picked up by, I would suggest, the Human Rights Commission. And I suggest that because when we first started all of this and asked to have this commission, it was by City Council turned over to the Human Rights Commission, which formed a subcommittee to work with the community. So since they kind of turned it over to the Human Rights Commission, then I think that's who ought to receive and handle and help the community to get their information to the proper hands without it going all over. And without you having to figure out and vote and decide where to put all these complaints. One place is fine, I think. And it gives a concentrated place for everybody knows where to go without people saying, now where can I go and get that complaint? And do I go here and what do I do? It can be right there, if that's something that's possible. But I also wanted to say, from the last meeting, I'm just concerned because as a person sitting out here in the audience and watching this task force, I don't know where I know where some people are on the task force, and then some people on the task force. Seems to be a split in your task force. I don't know how you think you're going to represent the community in a proper way when you can't get it together on the task force. Because I think some of you aren't listening to the community. You open it up and you give us a chance to talk, but it just seems like you're just letting us talk and then you're deciding what you want to do with your legal minds that you have on your task force. And that's not what we're asking for, and that's not what we asked for. I would like to see some kind of way this task force get together and understand maybe better what the community is saying and what we want you to do. We didn't form this for you to sit here and be neutral. You can't be neutral. If you're indeed going to try and bring about a change, you can't be neutral. We're going to have to do a little fighting here internally And I don't see that as a whole on this task force. So I don't know how to propose it because I've said so much, and I just think that you're tired of listening to us or you're tired of listening to me. I don't care if you're tired because I'm still going to talk, but I don't want to just talk and nobody's listening, because that's not your plate. You're here to listen and do something about what our concerns are about. You're not here to just listen to us and say, well, thank you. You're here to listen and make some changes. And to make changes, you got to do some fighting. So that means you're our catalyst against City Hall and the city fathers and mothers. And I don't know if all of you understand that. And is there something we can do to bring that together? That's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to follow up on some of the TJW revisions that we submitted for that section. So within the procedural choices for filing a complaint, I think you're asking a lot of people when you say that you're going to put in Rich's different options around under seal or not, confidential or not, or anonymous or not. You're asking for somebody to understand all of the language that you guys just read and the implications of that when they're submitting a complaint. So the revision that we're asking for is that somebody is only having to choose whether they're submitting an anonymous complaint or not. And that after they submit it, if they choose to not make it anonymous, then you would have a conversation with them about those different options, because there are really important implications for all of those things that are hard to understand through that language. That is very complicated legal language. So that's one of the revisions. The second revision is to make the recording, classifying, and reporting of those complaints very clear as to when a complaint is received, there's a record of every complaint that was received, that there's a classification system for those complaints. We included Rich's article about the reviewing of past incidents, but also that there's reporting that occurs on the complaint data. So this is what you were looking at earlier, Lauren, but that at some point that the commission also is going to publicly report in aggregate on all the different kinds of complaints it receives. So I think it's important that within the whole complaint process that you clarify that there will be records of the complaints. There's a way that those complaints will be classified and that information will be made public. So those were important additions that we felt.
And while you're up here, did we also miss this that I'm looking at right now that says 3.3.3 in red about the police chief is expected to carefully consider recommendations and that the commission can then also
So what we actually did, because Rich's document, it starts with incident review, and I think that the complaint procedure needed to be clarified as separate from the actual incident review process. So TJW created a whole clarification of the complaint procedures, like where the forms are available, all of that stuff, before getting into incident review. So we can talk about that in the next section that you guys will review.
Okay, so we didn't miss anything.
You haven't missed anything. Yeah. Thanks.
Hi, just briefly, I think that the procedure the delivery of the receipt of complaint should be optional. There should be a way to opt out of that in case, imagine like the spouse of a police officer or something who wanted to make a complaint, or like the child of a police officer, I don't know. But I know police officers have a domestic abuse rate twice the normal population. So just a way to opt out of that if there's any reason to. That's all.
Janet, I have a question. I didn't get a chance to, if you don't mind, my knees are bothering me and I don't want to get up. I thought I was loud as usual. my question is, I didn't get to read every single word, so I don't know if in what you're putting forward, do you talk about the composition of the commission? Like how many people it's gonna be? And that's in, I know there was things in there about representing certain groups and whatnot.
Not in this section, but yes.
No, not in this section.
Not in this section, but yes, we are
Well,
addressing that.
my question to this section is, are you assuming that whatever you put forward, the commission that is eventually appointed is gonna agree with it?
I mean, I would say the composition may change once the commission is formed, depending on, I think, once, it'll take some time to figure out what works or doesn't. And if someone's not represented or you need more expertise, I would say it's a starting point, but not an end point for what the composition is. That would be my expectation.
And I think that's written into the document that once, isn't that right, Rich? That at a certain point, the commission can change.
It can make proposals at any time to the city council for changes in the ordinance or charter. Yeah. I forget where that is, but.
A couple things. I think that I didn't hear anything that kind of acknowledged the technological era that we live in as far as making complaints. When you consider the possible fallout of, essentially community policing, should that result in a lawsuit, so on and so forth, we have a city that has a very good financial, incentive to want to control sort of the narrative by the means of flooding the office with many reports that may or may not be authenticated. So if there's a process with which a report can actually be authenticated and make that separate from anonymous, anonymous inquiries or whatever, because I don't want the limited resources to go to someone who doesn't even really want to put teeth. They just want to vent. They want to tell their story. They want to do that. People who are looking for justice should be the ones getting the priority as far as the resources, the time, the exposure, things like that. So there should be a process by which each story, each one is prioritized, and how can that be defined in a reasonable way?
Thank you. I would like to, if there's nothing else, I would like to move on to 3.3.5. Referral of matter to police chief. Promptly after receiving a complaint or after deciding on its own initiative to review an incident, the commission shall refer the matter to the police chief for a report, provided that, to the extent the complaint or inquiry concerns conduct of the police chief, the matter shall be referred to the city administrator. References to the police chief is in 3.3 shall apply to the city administrator instead when the matter is referred to the city administrator. 3.3.5. Is there, so essentially, what this is saying is that as soon as the complaint comes in, it'll be sent to the police chief. But if it involves the police chief, then it goes back to the complaint goes to the city administrator.
That's right, and I didn't want to keep saying the police chief or the city administrator, as the case may be, something like that. It makes it too ugly. So I just wrote that sentence saying, when we say police chief, we mean city administrator. If the complaint is about the police chief, so that it's going to the administrator.
And what you're describing is really just the police department has to be alerted as soon as a complaint comes in.
It gets the complaint.
That kind of is the precursor to them having to respond to it.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how that works in terms of, I guess what I'm wondering is the benefit of that, and I'm wondering too, especially if someone's trying to confidentially give it in because they're fearful potentially of some form of consequence, then what that means.
Yeah, I
So, because it's a small city
Yeah.
slash
Absolutely.
records, so, yeah. that
If,
seems
yeah,
like a
if
concern to me.
residents fear reprisal or something like that, then, yeah, I mean, certain incidents are so unique, it becomes very obvious who made the complaint, and I have a concern regarding that, so.
Would that be a situation where commission members would recommend that this gets filed under seal?
Maybe.
You know, I've read about it in the newspaper, this is a very unusual thing.
Yeah.
I would recommend as a commission member that you file this under seal, and we'll conduct our own investigation ultimately. Or we will make sure you're protected, or we won't tell the police that this is the situation where we don't tell the police that you filed the complaint. We protect you by keeping a special record of the complaint, but we don't reveal a complaint has been made in this certain weird circumstance. Is that what we're talking about here?
So like discretion, is that
Right.
what you're saying of the commission?
Right, like the commission might recognize that a situation is very unusual, and in an effort to protect that person, help that person understand, this might be a situation where we would want to make sure that you are protected. Is that?
And then what? And then not
Well,
provide it to the police? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and then not tell the police, and that's what under seal mean, right?
Well, actually, under seal, as I conceptualized it, meant that there's no public recognition of the fact of the complaint, other than sort of saying, okay, we received one complaint under seal. But my conception all along was that whenever there's a complaint about the police, at some point the police have to know that there is the complaint if you're going to do anything about it. I mean, if you're going to find the facts, you have to hear. It's not going to be worth much, I don't think, if you haven't asked the police what's your version of this at some point. And if there is wrongdoing, at some point you're going to have to say, here's what happened. So I think, as a practical matter, there's no way of moving ahead in anything without referring to the police. But and it does raise a point that, as I was writing, I realized, well, there's something that is left out. Maybe we should put it in. I didn't create. I wrote the possibility that the person says, I don't want the public knowing that my name. I'm happy for this to be aired publicly, that this happened, but I don't want them to know that I brought the complaint. And also the possibility of saying, I don't even want you to know who brought it. And the possibility of saying under seal, I don't want anybody to know, I don't want the public to know I brought the complaint. What I didn't write in was the possibility that the complainant would say, I don't mind that you, the commission, know my name. I don't want the police knowing my name. And maybe we should write that in if the task force thinks that's a good possibility. We can redraft that. So now, obviously, if the person who brings the complaint is at the heart of the incident, it's going to be very hard to say, the police officer mistreated me at State and Liberty on this such and such a date, but I don't want them knowing my name. But if it's a bystander, it could be that the bystander says, I'm willing for you to know me, I don't want the police to know me. That's a possibility. And that may address your concern to some extent anyway. I think that's a plausible choice. Am I making that clear? In other words, confidential, name known to the commission, not to the police.
So we are going to let the police department know the name of the who was affected? I mean,
well, if they want.
Really?
If who wants?
If the complainant wants.
Not if the police want.
Not if the police
want.
Yeah.
complainant wants.
If the complainant, I mean.
Otherwise, it's confidential, right? It's more the incident and what happened, but not any of the names, correct?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it's hard to complain about an incident without them knowing, in most cases,
But
who's
we are
involved
going
in the
to. But
incident.
we are going to do the investigation. Why should we be handing that over to the? Because I think that would be a big detriment for residents to come to the commission to complain, right?
I think that's part of the point of having a place where people report incidents that aren't
Directly
Yeah,
to the
otherwise they could
police.
go to the police chief and complain, right?
but
Part
you
of the reason to come here is to have that security, absolutely.
Yeah, but you can't, I mean, you can't, look, a lot of the evidence is gonna be in the hands of the police. It's gonna be the video camera, it's gonna be the body camera, it's gonna be whatever the police officer says. In most cases, you're not going to be able to get a full understanding of what happened without hearing from the police. I mean, you could have, you could say, well, we'll take a statement from you and go no further. And that's a possibility, I suppose. But it's not going to be a real investigation. And you're not going to be able to make any recommendations about an incident or draw any conclusions about an incident and get them to the police without the police knowing what incident you're talking about. So I think every commission, every board that I've seen, I mean, it basically makes the police department's own report part of the process.
But I'm confused about this. So if you're saying that it's not possible to simply register a complaint about procedure or behavior without identifying who made the complaint?
No. I think you can do that. That would be an anonymous complaint.
Right.
What I'm trying to say.
Or it could be confidential so that the police don't know who made the complaint.
Right,
I think
that's the whole point of it.
I think it's possible. I want to complain about this incident. I don't want the police knowing who it is who did it, who complained.
Right.
I think that's fine. But I think you've got to ask the police what's your version. What information do you have?
So, can I just give you an example? So, let's take the Blake Transit Center
Yeah.
incident. Let's say there was a witness there, and they come and complain and they testify what happened, their version of it. I understand. We don't need to let the police know who came and complained.
That's right.
We can still get the Blake Transit Center video recordings during 2 to 3 or whatever the time frame was. And so I don't think it's not like a quid pro quo, right? We need to give the police all this information in order for them to give us.
No.
Okay.
No. I'm just saying you need to get information from the police.
Yes.
And you have to identify what incident you want information about.
And this bit is really only about saying a complaint was made about behavior, for example.
Incident, yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's all it is. So that's not saying, here, we have to give you this information in order to get you to respond.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply, this complaint was made, we received this complaint, and you need to know about it, and there is, your reporting protocol now is enacted, and you have to then tell us what you know about this experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, of course, there may be complainants who say, I'm very happy for the police to know, and maybe they're going to figure out anyway who it is who's complaining. But yeah, I think a little redrafting is in order to make sure that somebody can say, Commission, I'm happy for you to know my name. I don't want the police to know my name.
And I think the thing you just said was the problem we're hinting at is that the police might find out anyway. Like, that's the thing we want to prevent. Am I right?
I mean, that's...
Can we?
In whatever way we possibly can, we want to prevent that.
Yeah, but I mean, if somebody is complaining about an incident, and let's say it was the one person with a police officer, it's going to be very hard to prevent the police from knowing that perhaps the person who complained...
They could think a bystander.
Well, it could be bystander, that's right, if there were bystanders.
I personally feel the default should be we don't give the name to the police.
That's fine.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The default is
That's fine.
it's not. You said somebody can opt out and say you guys can know the name, but don't give it. I think it should be the reverse.
I think actually the way I drafted was that it was presumed confidential, but I've got to rework that so that I mean that's fine.
Can people opt out of going to the police? So the point being that this commission is a different body.
Sure.
It has different powers. It has different influence. It has different relationships than the police, right? That's the whole point.
saying.
Sure, but maybe someone doesn't want necessarily legal authority,
Well-
right? Maybe it's an expression of something that's happened, it's providing data to the commission. It doesn't need to go to the police.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so,
Yeah,
so,
that's what I'm
so
wondering.
obviously, if it doesn't go to the police, the commission is limited in what it can do.
Sure, but it also
but-
gives its information to inform policy. It
that's
doesn't
fine,
have to
yeah.
be an incident review.
We can-
It's still
yeah.
good data to have.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we can write that as an option as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, exactly.
We can.
And my question
Yeah.
is, and it's kind of two-part. One is to opt out, but another might be potentially, I mean, I guess this goes to the time frame of it too.
Yeah.
What I was trying to express is not only just name, but that we live in a small place and people will know, and that retaliation sometimes happens
Yeah.
by police.
Right.
That is a real lived experience by some people. And so that is the fear that I'm trying to
Yeah.
Yes.
avoid.
Mhm. Yes.
So maybe it's both opting out or also, or potentially like months later or something. Like how can we still be in communication with that? If it's not confidential, how can we be, or if it's not anonymous, how can we be in communication with them so that maybe something can happen later, but that they're not being potentially harmed? Does that make sense, that distinction?
It's complicated because you want to be able, like what you're saying, being able to get in touch with somebody later on. I mean, if they go to the kiosk and they put their complaint in and nobody knows who did it and there's no way to get in touch with them after that's happened, it is only, it's either it goes to the police unless they, you know, like that's a sticking point because like if they don't put their name on the form and we can't communicate with them, we can't find them to help them understand what their protections are.
Yeah.
And it can only be, maybe there's a box that says this is for data only, or, I mean, that's.
Yeah, that's all I'm thinking about is the relationship, if we know their name. Obviously, if we don't know their name or contact information, then we can't access, we can't have that conversation. But if we do have their name, then the ability to be in conversation with them,
Yeah.
that's all.
If it's okay with the task force, I'd like to work on this one, and I take the point from TJW about sort of premature choices. On the other hand, I want to make sure that when people write a complaint, put their name down, they know that they're not necessarily making a decision to make it public when they do the complaint. So-
Well, their choices.
Yeah. Yeah, right, okay. Yeah. Yeah, right.
And that this whole, these two
But I mean, that's gotta be clear on the form, I think, you know.
Yeah, I wrote it clearly, but in
Yeah.
section.
No, on the form. Yeah.
All right. Public comment after we're done.
Yeah.
Can we just change the procedures that public comment can be after each section?
Yes,
Because
yeah, if they wrote the same thing as Rich, then I think that they deserve to have that.
sections to ensure revisions and nobody's gonna remember.
Task force, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Before we
So-
move on,
yes.
there was something that one of us said that I want to address. It was a suggestion that it might be an aberration if it was a police chief. And it's true, it could be. Howsoever, as my granddaddy would say. From an African-American man, from a black man's point of view, we have been taught to fear the police chief and the sheriff more than the officers. So we don't even see it as being an aberration. If the police chief and the sheriffs were about what they ought to be, there'd be a whole lot less oppression. So it's not an aberration. I just want to clarify that before you move on.
So with this one, we definitely need some clarification and some expansion on this.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
I can.
So
can
are we
work
all
on
on the same page on that?
Yeah.
All right.
I would say that, the clarification that you might want to do is that throughout your document, you guys have the ability to ask for data from the police department, and that's within the document.
Yeah.
So here, I don't understand why it has, that request for data around a particular incident has to go through the police chief. And so you're creating that person is like a conduit to get information about an incident. And so it creates a space where you're alerting the police chief. and other police that you're looking into something. Whereas if you guys are if the commission is sending them regular data requests, that doesn't necessarily always cue them to that data request being about a specific incident. So I don't think that you need to create a whole separate category where you're alerting the police chief every time you're looking into getting data and information about a particular incident. So that's why I would actually strike those sections, because you're creating a place where the police chief is a conduit in ways you don't need to.
Thank you.
So I have a brief comment, but I have a point of clarification first. So just to be clear, in this section or in no other section, there's no place for the commission to initiate proactive investigations or data reviews on their own without a claimant.
Yes, sir.
In which section, please? And I will hold my comment if I missed it.
3.3.2, the commission itself may also initiate review of an incident.
Yeah, so actually the question I have is about things that wouldn't be classified as incidents. And these exist in Ann Arbor and have historically. Untested rape kits, the curfew, trespass citations, why Ann Arbor police are using military-grade equipment and uniforms, and how much they have of it.
Yeah.
Data on street stops, car stops, just
Yeah.
any demographic information about the impact of policing in the city.
Yeah.
Please, don't interrupt me. Understanding the school-to-prison pipeline, understanding how AA police cooperate with other public institutions and other police departments in the area, civil asset forfeiture, count day, et cetera, et cetera. I would also like to point out that in this meeting, Rich, you've already said, I take the point, I want to make sure my document, I accept the revision, and many of you have referred to this as Rich's document, which was precisely the community critique at the last meeting.
So can I just say that 3.2 is all about that? Gives full authorization to look into any of those. We're not talking about 3.2 today, but that's what that is. The commission could look into any of those.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Shanice. I'm actually a big data analyst, and I've worked before for the U.S. Navy as well as the state of Georgia. And just also, I want to suggest as part of this reporting back to the police, the possibilities of also making these forms big data collection sites is also really great, because then you can also send back reports to the police to let them know, listen, we got this many reports related to these things. And those reports can then be all collected together. And it's not one incident, it's painting an overall picture for them that they need to respond to. And it's very easy to do and set up and then keep going. And it can, Also transparency, like was previously mentioned, possibly also making that available to the public would also be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So in talking about whether or not police should be informed or whether or not we should send reports to the police chief, you've talked about the form a lot, but I want to dial this back to the language of 3.3.5, because it starts out saying promptly after receiving a complaint, something should be sent to the police chief. And I think what I hear some of you saying is that sometimes that might not necessarily be like the correct first step. That there are plenty of things that the commission could do, like initiate their own independent investigation, talk to the complainant, do some internal investigation before there is a need to like necessarily go to the police. So more than just like making this information available on the form or letting the complainants know what their choices are, I think that the promptly in here should be stricken. So that like, in a lot of instances, we might want to get the police input at some point, but that shouldn't necessarily be like the first step of every instance of review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To speak a bit on the police's behalf, there also needs to be a mechanism, like people can obviously give fraudulent and erroneous statements about police. And if this becomes what it should become, you're going to get a lot of fraudulent stories about police. So at the same time, you have to, you kind of have to address both sides of the issue. I think that what needs to happen is there needs to be a community outreach to police where we can have real reconciliation. Again, build a bridge between the police and the people. We don't need to have a bunch of strangers in blue uniforms running around Ann Arbor. That doesn't do anyone any good. We can have a task force that promotes reconciliation where possible, where it's something little. Guy had a bad day. They meet and talk it out, shake hands and have a beer. We can have that kind of thing. We doesn't always just have to be this regimented process where someone's going to go to jail or someone's going to get. Sometimes it's just ending small disputes without having, you know, before larger ones happen.
Thank you. All right.
This is just a suggestion regarding anonymous complaints. I think that this can be dealt with fairly easily on the commission's website. You can have a special place on the website to communicate to the anonymous complainers that you're interested in more information, and you can have a drop dead point, where if there's no more information forthcoming, there's not much you can do about it. But I think that this, you want to protect anonymity, but also you're going to need more information. So I think you can probably figure out how to do that with the website.
Thank you. We'll take one more comment and then move to the next, please.
Yeah, I apologize for not hearing all of your comments, but I want to speak on those. But I just want to point out that not everyone has internet access, and not everyone is allowed to be at the Ann Arbor Public Library because they do trespass people, as some of you are aware. But I want to speak on the fact that I don't know when the best time is to engage with the police, like just the Patrolmen's Association. I don't know if we want to set up a board and then engage with them, or if it makes sense to engage with them, not just individuals on the task force, but actually have a community meeting where people can hear what patrol officers think of the board so it can actually work well. I don't know if that is something people want, but it's something we're thinking about.
Thank you. I'm very conscious of the time. It is now 8:35 and we adjourn at 9 o'clock. So we are going to move on and get as much done as we can, but to not discourage or cut off comments. The next one is 3.3.6, report by police chief. The police chief will report to the commission in writing stating the police chief's determinations as to A, the facts of the incident, B, whether there was any inappropriate conduct by the police, C, any discipline that has been or will be imposed, and D, any changes in policies or procedures that ought to be made as a result of the incident. Except to the extent prohibited by federal or state law, the city charter, or collective bargaining agreement, the report shall include all documents related to the incident, including statements by the officers involved, all video evidence and descriptions of any tangible evidence, provided that if the police chief believes that some information or materials related to the incident cannot be produced because of law or collective bargaining agreement, the police chief shall describe the information and materials withheld and state with particularity the reason why they cannot be produced. Task force members, any comment, discussion, questions?
And this is only responding to incidents that are brought to the police chief. So if we decide that there's a change in procedure and it's not guaranteed, an incident comes in and we have to tell the police chief about it, this now only refers to those incidents that the police chief is allowed to know about.
Great on.
I'll just say, I mean, this is an area where we're going to get some pushback from the city. You'll see in the packet a memo from the city attorney and deputy attorney to Lori and me, and then a responsive email by us asking for clarification and supplementation, suggesting information that they think is that they're legally prevented. We asked a bunch of questions. So I expect this to be a continuing matter of contention, but I want to emphasize that the way it's worded is very broadly that they give over everything related to the incident unless they can't. And
is, well, why can't you?
And if they can't, they have to say, say with particularity
Right.
why they can't. Yeah. Not just say they can't just say here's what we'll give you, and we can't give you other stuff. They got to say this is why and explain it.
It's in the city charter, it's in the collective bargaining
Point
agreement.
to the particular.
Right, that's what
point.
particularity means.
Yeah. That's right.
I appreciate Rich pointing out that this is one place where there will be a pushback. There are a number of places. We've already determined that we're not going to even deal with that.
Right.
We're going to move forward with what we believe is the right thing to do,
Absolutely.
So-
Yes.
regardless.
And it seems like there's certainly no harm in asking for whatever we can get related to an incident. So this seems like a good plan, this bit. Yeah.
Public comment? On this,
On this specific issue, I can say from personal experience that a City of Ann Arbor, where the police chief stands to a body of the citizens and explains his decisions about what he chooses not to censor among his officers, that's a very different Ann Arbor and a very different police force than we have right now. It's well worth fighting for.
thank you.
I say this from personal experience.
All right. Sounds like it's time to vote.
Hi, sorry about that. I was just noticing the collective bargaining agreement. I mean, I heard what you had to say about that, but haven't been at previous meetings, so I apologize if this has been covered sometime before. But where is the union going to be in this piece? Because I can tell you, as a woman of color, and I'm not speaking on AAPD, but speaking on a local jurisdiction, I was loosely stalked by an officer who had many problems with many of my friends, and I know it was retaliation, and there was nothing done until somebody white came up and spoke out for all of us, and he was on the force for many years with many problems. Excuse me. So, and I know that somewhere in that was because of the collective bargaining agreement. I know that's what that was. That was the union protecting him. So I just want to put that out there, like, I know you all are doing this piece, but where's the union rep, or how is that going to be addressed? Because that's always going to be an issue. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
I think that her point just clarifies what I'm asking in this, what TJW is asking for in this provision and revision that we submitted, is that you are in this specific section. I think all the things that you're asking for in terms of video evidence and tangible evidence, that should be included in the report, but as it's written right now, it all goes through the police chief, and her point just clarifies that you should be able to get all of that data and information, but not have to go through the police chief or other police officers to get that information. So you should be able to go to a space within the police department and ask for all the documentation on a specific incident without having to tell the police chief or officers. And I think that her point just clarified why that is critical.
Thank you.
If I can respond to that.
Sure.
Sorry.
I mean, I have a question just like organizationally. I don't know much about large organizations, but how often does a police chief actually talk to someone that's not a lieutenant or a sergeant? I mean, what's actually going on? Do they actually speak to these people, or do they just talk to the lieutenants, or do they actually talk to sergeants? Are any of them still here?
I think they ran out of seats. But I believe that all of that information would have to be FOIA'd unless the commission was given the authority to get it without FOIAing it. And they have a specific person that deals with FOIA's request.
I really think I don't believe that we should be asking for FOIA. This should be by right given to this. So I think we need to make sure that we are not going to go through the FOIA process. And as residents are talking about not going through the police chief, maybe just like if when residents want information, they have to go through the FOIA office, maybe we need to have some sort of an ombudsman like position where information can be given to this body that doesn't need to be FOIA. Because we have tasked this body to do a certain task, and we can't say that you can't have access to that information without jumping through hoops. That's not fair. So I think maybe that's what we need to envision for this, that there's kind of a neutral person you can go to, like a FOIA office, like City Hall, the city clerk's office, people can submit FOIA. Like that, maybe there's another person in the city clerk's office where they would be processing information that we need.
But again, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up on the police union question. And I apologize if this is public information that I just have not yet seen, but does anybody know who the head of the police union is?
His name is Eric Roberts.
Okay. Thanks.
Why has he chosen not to attend any of these meetings? He cares about how it affects his membership.
Don't respond to. Don't respond.
Are we able to?
We're not,
Yeah, we can't.
We'll be hearing from
we can't address that question.
I'm not sure.
Could you, anyone else? Task force? So where are we with this particular one? Are we okay with this?
Get the data.
Giving the added input.
Yes,
about
giving the
FOIA
added.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, noted.
And not
All
going
that's
through the
noted, yep.
Well, so I'm uncertain. I mean, if the task force is saying that, I guess I don't understand where that is, because as I understand it, as soon as a complaint is received by the police department, they go through a disciplinary process under the collective bargaining agreement, and ultimately it's resolved by the chief. So it's the chief that has the information.
Isn't that what we're trying to change?
When does it expire?
Well,
when does the agreement expire?
Just a minute.
So, well, I mean, there's going to be a disciplinary process within the police department, and
That the commission could potentially have influence over.
well, I mean that's another question. Sure, I mean under the collective bargaining agreement as it is, that's the way it stands, and from what I can gather, that would be a very, very difficult thing to change. But I mean, if the task force wants to make that as one of the aspirations, it can. But in any event, it's there's a lot of information within the police department, which is what we want the commission to get. So it seems to me, I mean, you have the process within the police department that leads up to the chief, and what the commission, it seems to me, wants is, okay, when you've got all that information and it's come up to the top, we want it from you. And we want, and by the mandate of this provision, we want the commission to get all that information. So I guess I'm not certain about the idea of trying to cut the police. I just don't understand, to cut the police chief out. It's they have the information that we want, and we want to get it from where they have it, and it's the chief who has it.
So
And
what you're saying, Rich, it sounds like, what I'm hearing is that there's so much and so many different kinds of information that make up any kind of investigation or disciplinary process or experience that somebody might want to talk about. And some of it will be and little bits of it will be in all different places. But maybe what you're describing are the pieces that are individual officer investigations and questions and things that might not have made their way to some sort of depository yet. Is that what you're saying?
no, I don't think so. I mean, what I'm saying is that if there's a complaint, then they have the professional standards investigation. It used to be called internal affairs. I think it's now called professional standards, right? And it ultimately goes to the deputy chief, and then if there's discipline, it goes to the chief. So they've assembled a great deal of information. They've spoken to the officer. They've looked at the video evidence. They've gotten whatever information they have. We already decided at the beginning of this meeting that we thought that the commission should be able to go beyond just inquiring into whether that was they did a fair process. But certainly part of what the commission needs, and it's essential, is to get the information that the police have. And it's the police, so this is something saying, okay, putting aside the situation in which somebody comes to the commission and says, but I'm just telling you this for your information, don't go to the police chief. If somebody comes to the commission and says, I'm making a complaint and I want this looked into, and I want policies changed and all that, the commission's got to get information from the police, and the natural person is the police chief.
But
other ways to access
but
it?
aren't there
That's the
other
question.
ways to access
Right.
that? I mean, is the
There's
police
different
chief
data
the only
systems.
person that has all of this information?
Well, ultimately, I mean, it goes.
There has to be a record and.
There's a record keeper.
And we
But
wouldn't
it's,
just be
yeah,
putting
but
them
again,
through
that
those
person's
interviews
not
But-
going to
but-
release
Their
anything
take
without.
No, but I mean,
FOIA
it's asking,
right now.
it's basically telling a responsible person in the police department, we want you to make a report to us and give us information.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
But the most responsible person is the chief. I mean, the commission should want the boss to come before it and explain what happened.
But can't we just get the information so that we can just see it? Why does it have to have the context of the chief?
Well, I think, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's the administrative system. I mean, I guess you could ask for it from the lieutenant who did the in charge of professional services, but that's not even the final information because the lieutenant doesn't finally decide the discipline.
Good, we don't want the final information. We want all the information so we can come up with our own.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you get it from the top, you're getting all the information.
Not necessarily.
Well, you get the report. Well, I mean, so all right.
Okay.
No.
Time.
Okay.
Excuse me.
We're off on the wrong track here.
Thank
We're
you.
pushing this towards something that is not going to work. We need the chief, the person in charge, to stand behind what the department is saying. But we're not going to need that in order to have
Wait a minute.
Wait, hold it,
Please.
hold it. We have someone standing at the mic, please.
I have an issue that I want to put before you. We have an incident that happened this weekend that I have a complaint about. We don't have the commission, so I'm going to propose it to you. I want to know, there's an investigation going on, so we can't know everything. I only know what I saw and what I've heard. So I want to know why the black gentleman was handcuffed and the white gentleman who said he was who he wasn't had no repercussions. How are you all going to have the commission deal with something like that when it's under investigation right now? And we need to know something so that the commission, we can help the commission and you can help us work together to resolve this issue. How do we go? We go to the police chief?
That's a good
Well, I think I spoke to that a while ago, that, you know, from a criminal standpoint, until the prosecutors had an opportunity to look at it and determine that charges are going to be filed against someone or not, in fairness to that person, whoever it may be, you know, that as much of that information needs to remain not secret, but it needs to remain, you don't want a case tried in the public before it's had an opportunity to go through the court system and the person's had a fair opportunity to be heard and the issue litigated.
Well, since we, as black people, have not had success in our courts with litigation, because we just don't. And I want to come to this commission, and I want this commission to investigate this. Do you think this commission is going to be able to investigate while the police are investigating, or you got to wait till they get through?
No. That's a very good
You can't, because here, well, and it's very complicated, but then you create what we call hearsay witnesses. So every person who talks to the people involved could potentially become witnesses because they've heard something from somebody who was involved in the incident. Now, whether or not that becomes true or not, you don't know. And it goes back to the what Anna was asking about what is a fact. In the criminal court, a fact is not a fact until the jury determines it's a fact. In the interim, it's everybody's version of what happened. And until a jury comes back and says, yes, he's guilty, or no, he's not, nothing is a fact until the finder of fact says it's a fact. I know that's complicated and I can't break it down any better. I'm sorry. I wish I could. Yeah.
First of all, I certainly hope the commission would look into any incident like the Blind Pig incident. And as far as I'm concerned, we already said there's no time limit. So the commission could look into the Blind Pig incident once it gets set up, if even though it would have been old. But I just wanted to address the idea, and I understand there's resistance that maybe the police chief is corrupting what happened below. Okay, possibility, but look at the language. Except as prohibited by law, the report shall include all documents related to the incident. Okay, well that would include from the lieutenant, and then a little later on, section 3.3.8, further information discussion. At any time before or after the police chief makes the report, if the commission believes that further information will be material to the consideration of the incident, we'll ask the police chief to present that information. So if there's concern that we're not getting the full story from the police chief, the commission can dig deeper. But it certainly wants to be able to hear from the top. It doesn't want. I think it would be counterproductive for the commission not to be dealing with the police chief.
Right now, the document as it stands capitulates to the collective bargaining agreement, and I want to propose striking that language. So typically, a union exists to protect employees from their employers. Here, the employees are the police. The employers are the members of the community, the city, the taxpayers. Typically, in a union, the employees aren't allowed to kill their employers without any repercussions, for example. And this collective bargaining agreement seeks to protect the police from the community, from the city, from any kind of input the community wants, right? So I think that any task force, any commission that's going to be successful in presenting critique to police and in transforming justice has to fight the collective bargaining agreement, has to fight cop unions, and has to be involved in the bargaining process.
Thank you.
I think the tone of this has kind of gotten off hand. I mean, I don't think we've really been real about what we're talking about. We're talking about challenging the power monopoly of the city. If there's no real challenge to that power, we're not doing anything. We're going to be wasting a bunch of time. If the police chief can decide what information we do or don't get, what's the point of asking him? Because this is about worst case scenario. We're talking about the police chief is a racist and wants to stop you from getting justice. We need to be able to circumnavigate that. The whole point of this, we are fighting racism, white supremacy. Let's be honest about what we're doing. How do we have a 3-hour conversation about this and those words are not used once? How? How? Are you scared? I'm not scared. If you're scared, you need to get out of here. If you don't want to challenge the power, get out. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at the beginning of the meeting, you guys decided all thumbs up that you wanted the commission to have investigatory power. And so I think what you should clarify in the language is that there's a difference between incident review and investigation. And so if you're doing an incident review, you don't need to go through the police chief to get all of the documentation about that incident. There's no reason to go through them. If you are conducting an incident, an investigation into an incident, then you should write in that you will go to the police to get whatever information they are gathering so that you can make a disciplinary recommendation as well. Like most of the time in New York City, you see that those disciplinary recommendations aren't followed, but it's, I think, important for this body to also make a determination that they see through their looking of the data as well. So I'm not saying you guys never talk to the police, but in an incident review, you don't have to, and in on an ongoing investigation, I think you should say that you want to. So that you will seek the information that the police have in that specific incident. So I think you should, and what we, TJW, wrote in our recommendation is clarifying the distinction between those two things. Thanks.
Thank you. It is now 9:01, and I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn, but I would like to recap what we have gone through. We have completed up to section 3.3.6. 3.3.6, the last one, seems to have a lot more discussion that is needed. So I'm asking the task force, what is your pleasure? Do we continue this at our next meeting? Do we come look at it individually and come back with some recommendations, taking into account all that we have heard?
I would like to go back over it again when we come back. I think that there's a lot more that can be hashed out about that.
I second Laird's. There will be more time to go over the additional documents, to read more carefully some of the information that's been discussed here. I feel like I haven't had enough time to really think about it.
Okay. Anna?
Oh, I'm just thumbs upping.
Okay. So are we on that page that we will come back and revisit 3.3.6?
Correct.
Okay, and do some homework in the interim.
That's
correct.
All right. So at this point, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I didn't hear first. Sorry. Anna?
That'll be a first.
I mean, Lauren.
First, second.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you to our community people for being here.
And please come back.
And please come back.
Best
We
meeting
welcome
yet.
your input. We
do.
are looking for listening to you.
When's the next meeting?
The next meeting is
The 12th of July.
of July, right here, 7 o'clock. Thank you.
It's getting good.